everybody. Welcome to another episode of Real Hawk Talk. This is an emergency podcast edition of Real Hawk Talk as the Seahawks, after what seems like an eternity, have finally made their decision about who is going to lead this offense from middle of the pack to middle of the pack? I don't know. We'll find out. That's what we're here to talk about as the Seahawks have hired Klint Kubiak, the former offensive coordinator of the New Orleans Saints and of the Minnesota Vikings, and probably other places that we'll talk about as well. He's now the Seahawks offensive coordinator. So we'll talk about that. And we've got a ragtag crew here. This is an all-star crew, I should say. Decided to go beyond the Real Hawk Talk group and asked C-Mike's Spin Move, Griff if you wanted to join, asked Rob if you wanted to join. They've been on enough. I know people are dying to hear all their thoughts. So let me first of all just welcome in Rob Staton as the guest of the guests on here. How are you doing, Rob?
Really good. It is 3:48 in the morning, but I can't resist coming on to talk about Klint Kubiak. So here we are.
I think that's important. People know that, and I think we should give Griff crap that Rob's able to come on at 3:48 in the morning, but Griff's got better things to do. He had a great thread on Kubiak. If you haven't gone and looked at Griff's Twitter's thread, but check that out. We've also got Deryck Gebe, who was on this morning. He's getting to walk in my shoes for one day. Double pod Sunday for Deryck. How are you doing, man?
Good. First double pod day ever. I don't know what your record is, Brian, but
I think I've done 3 or 4 in a day. But it's important. It's important for you to cross this barrier in your life. And maybe never cross it again. We'll find out. Nathan Ernst. We tried to have Nathan on yesterday. I kind of screwed him out by having to change the time, but I'm glad we get to finally find. Like the Seahawks gave us a reason, Nathan, to come together on this Sunday evening. How are you doing?
Great. I mean, I'm here to talk about the Chiefs, but yeah, we can fit in some Seahawks talk.
Yes, I figured you had a few things to say there. And then Jeff Simmons, who also doing a double pod Sunday. How are you, Jeff? Oh, you're on mute somehow, or we're not hearing you. We will wait. Is that working?
Canadian internet strikes again.
No, we're not hearing you for some reason. I don't know what's going on. You can even maybe unplug. Oh, you're on mute. Try to unmute now.
Test one.
Yes.
Okay, I don't know what happens. 10:50 my time, so I was about to kind of brag, but Rob threw me under the bus there. He's way more of a sicko than I am. So
yes.
I'm excited
You
to talk
both.
to both of you guys.
I think you've probably gotten less sleep than him though with the newborn, so it's at least equally impressive. All right, so let's throw this out to the crew before we get into talking about Klint Kubiak, which is what everyone really wants to hear. Let's get some reactions to this game. I know people have some feelings about the Chiefs and the Bills. Everybody wanted the Bills, right?
Yeah, I wanted the Bills to win.
Everybody wanted the Bills, right, Nathan?
Except it. So this is so insane to me. I really don't know what people want out of sports. Are we so ADHD brained that we just need to see different colored jerseys every year, that we can't appreciate greatness? Getting an opportunity to watch a team try to do something that's been done 3 or 4 times in NFL history, a three-peat, getting an opportunity to watch Patrick Mahomes in his prime, in his quest to become the greatest quarterback of all time. Like, we mythologize guys like Vince Lombardi or Bill Russell or Babe Ruth. But if these guys were playing today, all we would talk about is how boring it is that we have to watch them in the, there's I'm sure on YouTube, you can go find a Meineke Car Care Bowl and you can watch the 6th best Big Ten team play a Sun Belt team if you're that desperate to see mediocre sports teams face off. But I think it's cool that we're getting to watch like a generational thing, and that doesn't happen a lot. That's what the word means. Like, I just don't understand how people have not only no appreciation or excitement, but people are actively angry about this. The belly aching in our group chat already is driving me nuts. I don't get it at all.
I want to hear from other folks on this. Deryck, I'll come to you next. For me, it's not about the Chiefs. I'm in the minority that I don't have Chiefs hate, and I think there's folks on this pod that do, or even Chiefs fatigue. Man, I feel for the Bills fan base, man. I've seen that team, I've seen that franchise lose 4 straight Super Bowls, some that they should have won. I see that, like, I like Josh Allen, I like that fan base, and I want to see them win. So that was it more for me. And personally, I really felt like, I mean, I think the whole Chiefs get all the calls stuff is generally really annoying and been an annoying storyline all week. This wasn't a good game to dispel that perspective. There were some really rough calls, especially the 4th down call. And it was a shame because I felt like they didn't need to be that involved. They could have just let the game play out and it would have, like, the Chiefs probably still would have won. Probably. But, you know, I felt like that was a little bit of an annoying part, and I'm just bummed for Bills. But Deryck, you had a reaction to it. What I thought, Nathan, you're pretty. I agree with a lot of what you said. Deryck, what did you think?
I mean, there's 2 points that I would say to Nathan, and that's one. I think you can appreciate what is happening and appreciate that Patrick Mahomes is probably on his way to becoming the best player of all time, and understanding that, and be in awe of the greatness. But I don't think you have to be excited about them going to yet another Super Bowl. And then, the point about watching a Sun Belt team versus the 6th best Big Ten team, it's like, that's not the reality. Josh Allen and the Bills are a great team. Joe Burrow and the Bengals have been a great team at times, and they got to a Super Bowl one year. But my point would be there's a lot of great players that, probably deserve a shot here, and it's getting tiring to see the same guys show up every year.
We're already getting complaints that we're not talking about the Seahawks enough. Jeff or Rob, anything you guys want to say about this game? You're welcome to chime in if you have any thoughts.
I'd just say I just really like the Bills, and I was kind of hoping the Lions and the Bills would play a Super Bowl. I thought it'd be a fun Super Bowl. And then it'd be 2 fan bases that have probably not had much going for them. I'd get there, and the Lions had a miserable playoff loss, and now the Bills have as well. So it's more torture for them. But yeah, that would have been quite a fun game. I think everybody would have looked forward to that Super Bowl. So that's kind of where I was coming from. I wanted to see the Buffalo Bills get to the Super Bowl for that reason.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah. I think what Nathan said is dead on. And I have ADHD brain as a sports fan. What Nathan said 100% is true. I remember as a kid cheering for Reggie Miller to beat Michael Jordan and being devastated. And like years later, I was like, what? I cheered against Tiger Woods. I'm part of the problem. I am part of the problem, 100%. The only difference is like Andy Reid's obviously like super likable. Like I have a connection to the Bills. Like they're our local team in Toronto. I used to cover them. Like of all the people I know, like I feel a serious connection to them. So I don't have like the pure Chiefs hate that some other people do. I covered the Bills for like 7 years. Like to see them as like the premier team would be so cool to me. And they still – so that game just pissed me off because little things about the Bills just pissed me off. And I'm part of the problem. I definitely cheer against, like, the great new teams. And probably looking back 10 years later, I'm going to be like, I'm an idiot. I cheered against Brady for years. And then all of a sudden he goes to Tampa. And I'm like, I kind of like Brady now. And, yeah, it's ADHD brain. It's contrarianism. I don't know what it is. But, yeah, it's definitely not my best strength as a sports fan.
Well, yeah. The only other thing I'll say on that game is I just think Steve Spagnuolo does not get the credit he deserves. I mean, that guy, the amount of times he makes the right call in the right moment in the biggest stage. I don't know if I've seen a play caller on either side of the ball be so good in those moments. And yeah, Dalton Kincaid probably should have caught that pass, but Spags won that rep completely, and it was a Hail Mary toss-up that maybe should have worked, but man, that guy is so good. And watching him and Joe Brady go back and forth, like Spags taking away the middle, Brady going to the outside, then going back, like it was fun to watch that back and forth. I know, ultimately I wanted the Bills to win, but that was the Super Bowl from my perspective. We just watched the Super Bowl, so that was kind of cool. Jeff, you look like you got something to say.
No, I don't want to. Like that Joe Brady on that last drive really pissed me off. Like, what the hell was that screen to Amari Cooper on 3rd down to set up like a 4th and long, and you run the ball, like you don't hand the ball to James Cook, you had to tie John. It looked like a Ryan Grubb drive. And so that Spagnuolo, absolutely, that corner blitz was awesome, and it was Spags' finest. But the Bills did some stuff in that game that just drove me bonkers. And I didn't know, like, why are you throwing a screen to Amari Cooper, their slowest receiver?
Oh, he is slow, dude. Oh my God.
That was infuriating to no end. But the Bills find ways to lose these games.
Yeah.
And they did it again.
All right. Well, you mentioned Ryan Grubb, so that's a good segue. Rob, I'm going to give you honors on this as well. So news comes out ahead of the game, which is just weird timing. Generally, like, that is not a time that you leak news or like announce things. So what was your reaction when you heard the news that Klint Kubiak is the new OC?
Oh, first reaction was, I've sat here waiting for 3 weeks for this news, and then they announced it just as we went on the radio for the Bills Chiefs. So I was frustrating, but I like the hire. I don't think there was a home run hire that the Seahawks could have made. There wasn't somebody who kind of stood out. He said, "That's the guy. Like, you've got to get him." There was no sort of fired, offensive-minded head coach who still had a bit of credibility that you thought, well, he just needs another chance, to be a coordinator or whatever. And then you'd be all guns blazing. So when you look to the candidates, he had the play calling experience. He'd done this kind of a job before with a defensive-minded head coach. He's been around some good coaches. He's been around North Turner, Stefanski, Shanahan. I prefer that it's one coordinator making all the decisions, not, a run game coordinator / offensive line coach with a passing game coordinator going, well, should we do a pass here or a run? And then they're like trying to debate. I was not a big fan of the whole Darrell Bevel, Tom Cable 2.0 idea. I think the only reservation that I've got is the blocking scheme. I want to see big, angry, physical offensive linemen up front. I want to see people movers up front, and that's not what the zone blocking scheme typically has. The one encouraging thing is New Orleans drafted Talius Fuaga as their first-round pick last year, and he was aggressive and big and physical. So that is sort of the thing I'm clinging to here, that the Seahawks might go in that direction. But I thought, given the cards they were dealt, they've played a good hand here.
It's funny, Nathan, as Rob talks about not wanting to do a Darrell Bevel, Tom Cable redux. This feels like a bit of a Darrell Bevel hire to me. Like, one of the things I was wondering about with this is, let's say you hire Grant Udinski, 28-year-old wonderkind, and the Seahawks offense takes off. He wasn't going to be here next year. Like, like, I already was like, the word was out. Klint Kubiak feels like a guy that could be just good enough to stick around, but not great enough necessarily to be gone the next year. Like, I'm curious, like, what was your reaction? What are your thoughts about Klint Kubiak?
Yeah, I mean, I really don't think they're actually very protected from that with Kubiak. I mean, if they have a great year next year, which, look, if he takes them to like a top 5 offense and then gets poached for a head coaching job, awesome hire, great job. Like, I'm not going to be mad about that at all. But he's still young. He's got a pedigree, and if he finally really proves on some of the, delivers on some of the promise that his resume at least, shows, then yeah, I think he is actually a candidate to get poached, or will at least get some attention. But on the hire overall, like, he's really hard to, I think, parse and have a really strong opinion on. There's some exciting stuff with him, and like, you look through the tree and the coaches that he's been with and everything that Rob mentioned, and that's really exciting. But then he's been around for so long, and he's had some bad offenses, and there's a ton of caveats on that. And so it's just one of those where, like, a little bit of like familiarity breeds contempt, and the shine is off of him a little bit, and for some fair reasons, I think. And so a lot of coaching hires, it's just not easy for people outside to really have a good idea of how it's going to work. I mean, I think coaching hires are one of the hardest things to predict when we're talking about head coaches. And then, when you're looking at like a level down from that, it gets even harder. So certainly, like, no reason to freak out or be sad or like get mad or any of that. I think it's got every opportunity to work, but it's not something that I'm like, oh yeah, Super Bowl, here we come, this is it, we're finally unlocking Geno, or anything like that either.
Deryck, one of the things I think that got a lot of criticism from Ryan Grubb was not a lot of under center, not a lot of play action, not a great run game. I think those are the probably, and red zone would probably be another, although the Seahawks did finish in the top half of the league in red zone rate. Geno had some something to do with some of that red zone problem as well. So I don't think it's just Ryan Grubb. But when you look at Klint Kubiak last year, there's a little bit of a story of like the tale of the first part of the season, and then like they lose their offensive lineman, they lose Derek Carr after week 5, they lose Rashid Shaheed, who was like a huge part of their initial success, and so things kind of tailed off. But in the first game of the season, their play action rate was 36%. Second week of the season, it was 58%. Third week of the season, it was 27%, and then it really just starts dropping. Like they only had one play action rate over 25% after week 3.
You know what happened in week 3?
They lost their center, right?
They lost their center.
Eric McCoy, I think. Is that his name?
Yeah, he's their best offensive lineman.
So like they ended up, I think, 23rd in the NFL in play action rate. But they didn't start off really that way. So I'm kind of curious, again, your initial reactions and what you think about like his chances to be different than Ryan Grubb.
Yeah, I like the hire, just first and foremost. To Jeff's point about the center, Derek Carr talked about how being with Kubiak changed how much he has to do at the line of scrimmage. He doesn't have to call protections, right? That's all the job of the center in this offense. So to the play action point, maybe that's something to do with the protection schemes that the center is responsible for, and they didn't feel comfortable with whoever the backup center was making all those calls up front. So overall, in terms of Kubiak, you mentioned a little more under center. He also does 12 personnel a lot more than I think Grubb did. So going back to our earlier show today, talking about a second tight end and how important that might be in the draft or in free agency for the Seahawks. He also uses motion a lot, which felt like something that got away from Grubb. It's something he did so much at UW, and it didn't seem like it translated all that much to the NFL. And that was kind of a surprise. So I think you'll get back to that.
Jeff, if I look at just weeks 1 through 5, now, there's a danger in doing that. But if I just look at weeks 1 through 5, which, by the way, includes some stinkers for them. They had, 219 yards against the Eagles in week 3. They had 220 yards against the Chiefs in week 5. So these aren't just all their best games. But if I just limit to those 5, they were 6th in the NFL in rush success rate. They were 5th in the NFL in rush EPA. They were 7th in the NFL in dropback EPA. And they were 6th in the NFL in EPA per play through the first 5 weeks. So tell me what you think about this hire, and what do you think Kubiak can bring to the Seahawks?
I mostly felt a bit of relief. I was getting really uncomfortable with where I thought the search was going to go. Even we saw after the fact that they interviewed another run game coordinator this week, and it felt like they were starting to trend to overcorrecting a little bit based on what happened last year. The name like I was getting worried about, I even brought it up on your show a couple weeks ago, Brian, where it's like Anthony Lynn, who was Dan Campbell's first offensive coordinator, just like beat your head against the wall, meathead run game. And I was like, oh my God, Macdonald's going to love this guy. So I was at first just relieved that it was a guy that we identified, which I was totally good with. I'm with Nathan. Like, this is not to me like a home run hire. I think it's a good, but I think it's a perfectly fine hire. I think the tricky thing is just trying to separate him from his situation. And that's the thing I'm kind of trying to figure out. Like, he's been with all defensive coaches the last year of Mike Zimmer, a lame duck, Dennis Allen, and now another defensive coach. Obviously, Kyle thought enough in between to hire him to put him on their staff. But weeks 1 to 5, the thing I liked about what the Saints did, and if you remember after the first 2 weeks, people were like, this dude is getting head coaching interviews. That's the conversation I hate. I hate that. I think it's so stupid that people have 2 good weeks and like, this guy's a head coach. Dan Quinn gives him like 47 points in the playoffs last year. He's the best head coach of all these guys. But what I liked about what Kubiak did is they really maximized their personnel. Like if you watched how like they used Kamara and Shaheed and even like Taysom Hill to an extent, like he was really like I watched when he first came out, like the first rumor came out like 2 weeks ago. I watched that Dallas game and like they were doing a lot of cool stuff. It was a lot of like play action on early downs, a lot of throwing out of shotgun on first down, the way they were kind of creating space for Shaheed. Kamara, if like he played fantasy football for like the first 7 weeks, was like one of the best running backs in the league. And then everything fell apart around them. And by the end of the year, they're rolling out like Spencer Rattler, Marquez Valdez Scantling, dudes I've never heard of, like backup offensive linemen. They got Trevor Penning. It's like, is he bad? Is their personnel bad? I don't know. I'm not saying it's an excuse. I legitimately don't know. So I think like what Rob said, like given who was out there, I think it's a pretty solid hire. I think it's pretty competent. There's some things I think he'll do really well if Geno's the quarterback. I think the under center game will be very helpful. I think Griff's thread was really interesting that he kind of compared it to like how they ran the offense with Jared Goff in LA. A lot of the splits were similar. But again, my question with Kubiak comes down to, is he the guy to fix the decade-long offensive line problem? Is that a Kubiak thing? Is that a Schneider thing? The thing that worried me about like a Udinski, and we've seen it honestly with Macdonald, is like, can he build his own staff? Like if they had Udinski or even Fraley, it seemed like they were helping put together. I think Kubiak, from being around, and a lot of the guys, like his dad's right-hand man, Rick Dennison, was with him in New Orleans last year. There's an offensive line coach. I think he'll at least have a staff he can put together. I think it is a weakness of Macdonald, and that fear has come to life a little bit, that he hasn't had the connections and he hasn't had the young. So I think Kubiak, from that standpoint, I think offers a lot more than some of the other candidates. So I think it's a pretty solid get for them. And I really agree with what you were saying before, that it feels like these guys can be together for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think his upside is higher than Bevel's, but I see what you're saying with like, they stuck around a little bit. It's like the
Bevel's won a Super Bowl, went to back-to-back Super Bowls, had like a top 5 DVOA offense for like 4 straight years or whatever. Like, other than some notable moments, I thought Darrell Bevell was a perfectly good OC. There's things about him that frustrated me, like the amount of wide receiver screens to people that shouldn't be catching wide receiver screens. But in the grand scheme of things, I thought he was not so bad.
Yeah, so I think like, yeah, it's not like, I'm not like ecstatic about it. I'm not like fist pumping, but I think it's a pretty solid group, and I think it kind of lets them move forward a little bit where they felt like they were grasping at straws.
So listen to all you guys. What I'm getting is essentially high floor. Like, don't feel like this is going to be a disaster. I didn't hear anyone being like, oh man, this is a blown hire. Question is how high the ceiling is. Is that a fair characterization of kind of where you guys are?
I think the ceiling's maybe being overestimated here. Or I mean, sorry, the floor. The floor is there's absolutely disaster potential with this hire. Now, it's not like Udinski, where like he's never put together a staff and never done a ton of the stuff. Like, he's got the experience and all that should help, keep it even keeled at least. But you can go look at some old like Vikings fans' reactions to Klint Kubiak, and you can look at some of these offenses that, again, lots of caveats to why they weren't always great, but the floor the bottom can fall out here. Like, it's not disaster proof by any means.
You were doing a awesome ventriloquism impression there for a bit. Your picture was frozen, and we were hearing you talk, but
all better
we
now?
heard all of it. So
okay.
The audio came through. That's the most important. I mean, yeah. I guess I don't see the floor being that low. Is it, like, tell me if anyone else does. Like, I guess I've heard from some folks, like, this guy hasn't had any big years as an OC. His offenses have generally not been that great. And I think that's a fair criticism. Although I look at his time with the Vikings, Kirk Cousins had a terrific year with him. Justin Jefferson had a terrific year with him. Dalvin Cook had a pretty good year with him. And they were off to a pretty good start here, with a lot of guys having like what seemed to be off to career years. And I just keep coming back to, I think that it's really hard with OCs sometimes. Like, people forget that coaches in general, a lot of times they have these false starts. Like, Bill Belichick was not great right away. Pete Carroll was fired multiple times. Kyle Shanahan, when he got hired to Atlanta, had never had like a great offense. So you never know when you're going to get the right situation and the right fit. But I think if any of you guys were like, this is a home run hire, I would look at you kind of like, really? And if any of you are like, this is a disaster hire, I kind of like, really? So that's kind of where I'm hearing. Rob, is that accurately kind of capture where you are?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very good way of putting it. And the thing is that Jeff mentioned, Rick Dennison potentially could join him, and then John Benton is the offensive line coach that he took with him to New Orleans. Is very experienced. Has worked with his dad, has worked in San Francisco for a long period of time. He could potentially come over. I think you've got an element of experience there that will just enable things to, I think, function a little better. So some of the things that maybe Ryan Grubb struggled with, because it was a learning curve for him in the NFL, they're just not going to exist next year. So they should be able to function to a certain level. Now, what that ceiling is, whether he can create an offense that within 12 months, people are talking about him as the next great offensive, Liam Cohen, he's getting GMs fired so that he can go to the place that he wants to go, and he's getting Ben Johnson money. Well, that remains to be seen. But I think that's the good thing for me. I think I was ready to see somebody who's, I know that his dad sort of being in the NFL doesn't mean that he's going to be good, but someone who's been in the NFL, his whole life, really. It's been like he's been on this trajectory to be probably an offensive coordinator for a large part of his life. He's done it in New Orleans. He's done it for a brief period at other stops. Now we're going to see what he's doing it here. But look, this is the start, isn't it? The next thing, what happens next is big. It's what are they going to do at quarterback? They're going to have to come to some compromise agreement with Geno Smith to preserve that relationship. Is that plausible in the next few weeks? Going to have to see. What are they going to do with the offensive line? These questions are going to determine whether he is a success or not. If they trot out a really bad offensive line again next year, then they might as well put one of us in charge. Like they're going to have to do something there in order for this to function.
Rob, what do you make of the timing? Why did they announce it when they announced it?
I don't understand the timing of anything that happened tonight. So the Bears announced their defensive coordinator and offensive coordinator during the game. The Seahawks announced their offensive coordinator right before the game. There was a report that the Saints desperately want to go and see Kellen Moore tomorrow during the game. I was thinking, could you not have saved this all for tomorrow? Or could you not have done this like 6 hours ago when I was sat on my couch, just sort of chilling out, rather than having to talk about it now, shoehorning between this classic AFC Championship game? I don't know. I really don't know about the timing.
Is there a chance, guys, that the reason for the timing is that this Houston job is lurking out there? And
yeah,
I think it's a better job for an OC than the one that Seattle's got. And they're like, Kubiak, report from Aaron Wilson was there was interest in Kubiak, but they never got to the interview stage and Seattle closed. Like, is that part of what? No, Deryck, you say no. Why?
Well, I find the timing bizarre in general because it seems clear to me that Fraley was the number one choice because they could have had Kubiak sealed up 2 weeks ago. But you found out Fraley was staying in Detroit, I think, on Thursday. So you've had 3 days. I mean, what did you do Friday and Saturday? And, presumably they started working this morning towards getting him hired. But I'm really confused what happened the last 2 days then, because either Kubiak is the guy or you got cold feet and said, well, shoot, maybe whoever we want isn't going to take the job. So let's just hire Kubiak now. It's very bizarre to me.
It was Friday, by the way.
Okay.
The Fraley news. Just double check that. But yeah, Friday was when that news broke. Jeff, you have any theories?
I think they saw Clint hurt going to the Super Bowl, and they're like, we need to steal the spotlight. But Jeremy Fowler reported that they interviewed a Ravens run game coordinator, like a lifer who's been and they said they did it this weekend. So that's where, like, again, I think the search could have got real ugly if Kubiak got out. And I think the Houston job, and the Jets apparently too had Kubiak high on their list. So I'm guessing they just want to firm everything up before kind of they can shift into draft offseason mode. And I think I think the Houston job especially, but like I've been thrown off by their timing, and I've been looking. I was refreshing. I said it this morning. I was refreshing this stupid website like a madman ever since like the Fraley stuff started and the Kubiak's their front runner like a week and a half ago. And then the one time I put my phone down to watch the game, the news breaks. So I don't know. I haven't really understood why, if they liked Kubiak, why didn't they just hire him last week when he was in person? I don't know.
The
They've
amount
looked
of
a
Twitter
little
porn
sloppy.
that Jeff Simmons has consumed by refreshing to find out about the OC position is probably remarkable.
I was happy to hear that most of us in this group are sick as I am and was following this like a madman, because I felt like a moron. Just like, is it gonna happen today? And then it's like you go through the whole day and like there's not even one rumor.
I mean, I think we were all there. One of the things I like about the timing is they do get this done just in the nick of time before the Senior Bowl. And to be able to have the scouts and the coaching staff fully focused on that and not be doing interviews and not be having to like run away from the field to make a quick call and finalize something, and also to be able to go in there and have a like an aligned perspective on what kind of linemen are they going to be interested in getting. Like, I haven't had a chance to really look at their split between gap and zone, but generally Kubiak, his dad, ran a lot of zone. And so I'd assume that that's kind of where they're a little bit more leaning. Does anybody have insights into that or have done any research on that? Yeah. So, I mean, the interesting thing there is like Charles Cross, good fit for zone scheme. Like maybe Olu, decent fit for zone scheme.
By the way, did you see Charles Cross's splits though? He was way better in gap last season.
He was. Everybody was. So that's like a question mark for me.
Weirdly, I think Abe Lucas was like the one who wasn't. And that was strange. Because he was the one you'd probably think would be the way that he plays. But
well, and Jeff, you talk about them drafting Fuaga. Fuaga's not a zone scheme guy. Like, I mean, I think all these guys have to do both. So it's like we're not in the late 90s where it was like, Alex Gibbs and you only ran that type of run scheme, but they do have to have some tendencies and like it's interesting. Fuaga seems like more of a power player than a runner, zone scheme runner. So I think that's a big thing. I think that's a benefit of this timing. Like, get it done, get it locked in, focus on now finding players that fit the scheme, fit the system. So, anybody have any predictions based off of this? Like, do you think that this changes anything for Geno Smith? Do you think this changes anything for DK Metcalf? Do you think Scott Huff is going to stay? Do you think he's going to go? What about like tight end? Juwan Johnson was a pretty big part of their system. Is Noah Fant now more likely to stick around or be a bigger part of the offense? Curious if anyone
I was wondering that.
Yeah, Deryck, go ahead.
I was wondering about Fant. Maybe they can restructure his contract and get him back on a lower cap hit if he even fits what Kubiak wants. Being more in 12 personnel, I presume he wants a bit more of a blocking presence there. I'm not sure Noah Fant is the greatest run blocking tight end. I'm just glad it's not such a projection. This is kind of going back a step, so I'm sorry, but I'm glad it's not such a projection on what you're getting here. It's not, okay, Udinski, and then you have to find a run game coordinator. It's not Fraley, and you have to find a passing game coordinator. It felt, even Stenovich is basically a career offensive line guy. So all these other guys really felt like you'd have to square a round peg,
Yeah. Well, does anyone take anything away from this with Mike Macdonald? Do you feel like you learned anything or you have an interpretation about Mike Macdonald based on this decision? Nathan, any thoughts there?
No, I mean, I think, he's methodical. I think we already knew that, right? He wanted to talk to a lot of folks. I think Rob, you were talking about this earlier, and it's been mentioned a couple times that this was not the best year to need an offensive coordinator. There was not an abundance of talent out there. And so, it seems like it's cool that they looked into some guys like Udinski. It seemed like Fraley was probably their number one guy, which is, I think, at least conceptually cool. And then, when it kind of got to the point where it was like, hey, this is this is what it is, and we got to make a call. They pulled the trigger and got the best option out there, even if it's not like, necessarily the most exciting, latest and greatest thing. So I don't think there's a lot to learn here. But for him doing his first, he would get mad if he heard me say that, but it's not his first offensive coordinator hire, but with all the time and a normal situation, it's his first time through. It seemed like he handled himself well, and it's a good quality of a head coach.
Yeah. Is this, if you have to predict, is Mike Macdonald going to, is this hire going to make his career in Seattle, or is it going to ruin it? If you had to bet one or the other, because I'll put it this way. Mike Macdonald is going to be in his second year. Obviously won 10 games in his first season, got his defense into the top 10. The offense regressed quite a bit. His first hire on offense didn't work out. Philosophical difference. It was explainable why that was a difference, why they had that issue. And now he had the full time. He had the full opportunity. This was completely his hire. This was not a John Schneider hire. This is a Mike Macdonald hire. If this doesn't work out, I mean, I don't think that bodes well for him going forward. So
it's a John Schneider, isn't it?
Yeah, does it bode well for anyone if it doesn't work out?
I was going to say the answer to that question, Derek's going to like this one. It comes down to Schneider. Can Schneider fix the problem? They can hire the best offensive coordinator in the league. If they don't fix the problem, it doesn't matter. It's not a fun answer to your question, but
it's the right answer.
It's the right answer. So I think a lot comes down to can Kubiak and his staff. And it seems like reading some of the Saints writers, it seems like Kubiak is going to bring over. He has a group of assistants that he's going to work with. Can they influence what seems like the boss of the building to change their philosophy on offensive linemen? Because if they just keep rolling the dice in the draft, it's not going to work.
Do you think Kubiak can do that? Do any of you feel like he's going to shift anything in that organization to affect how they draft offensive linemen, how they coach offensive linemen, the cohesiveness of how the run game is put together and the pass protection is put together?
I don't think he needs to. I think ownership's probably done it for him. I think they've told him, you've got to fix that offensive line. That'd be my guess.
Yeah. Do you guys think it's just as simple as getting the players and the rest of it will fall into place?
Well, I mean, I've got a prediction, Brian, that I think you will dislike, and it may shape how you feel this goes. I think they'll end up. I think there's a decent chance they're going to end up drafting a quarterback this year, and I think it could easily be one of just the way just the way that the I can remember the Kubiak offenses. I could imagine a Jackson Dart in this kind of a scheme, but I can also imagine a Quinn Ewers in this scheme, and they may well sort of go in that direction. And if you don't believe in either of those two players, then it's probably not going to work out, is it?
That's interesting. And, I guess what I'll say there is the cynical part of me would say, if you're trying to buy yourself a little time, you get rid of Geno Smith and you go with a young quarterback, and you have a competition against Sam Howell, and you say, look, we're going young. It's going to take a little while. We're going to give these guys a year or two to develop. Don't expect it to all come in the first year. I don't think that'll fly, especially the year when Jaden Daniels is playing in the NFC Championship. But, I mean, there is logic to that from a save your ass, cover your butt perspective. There's a story you can tell ownership about that.
It won't fly, though. I mean, they talked about when Pete left that decision was made because the team underperformed. They clearly felt they should be in the playoffs this season. They thought Macdonald would get them over that hump. Didn't happen. They were on the fringe. They were close enough. 10 wins is not a bad season by any means. But they're not going to take a punt now, I don't think. I think that'll be a very strange shift.
They're going to do something, though. I mean, Brady's even tweeting about it today again. Did he tweet about it? It was the bottom of his article, actually. It's the bottom of the article about Klint Kubiak's hire. It's unknown whether they're going to be able to get a deal done with Geno. He keeps saying it. He's not the only one who keeps saying it. He knows what he's talking about. So it does feel as maybe that's just the team applying a bit of pressure, and there's going to be some brinkmanship over the next 6 weeks, and then they're going to compromise, and everything's going to be fine for at least this season. But I don't think they're going to take on a $44.5 million cap hit, and I don't think they're going to pay him a huge contract. So there's going to be some ground seeded somewhere by somebody between now and the combine, and that's the next big thing, because that's going to happen before free agency and the draft. So that's the next big domino to fall, whether they get to that compromise agreement. And if they don't, then all bets are off. Anything could happen. They could go and get another veteran. It could be Sam Darnold. It could be drafting and pairing him with a Howell. Who knows? But it's, he's been here before. He got rid of Hasselbeck, and it was Tavares Jackson and Charlie Whitehurst. He got rid of Russ, and it was Geno and Drew Lock. He's done it before. So
I think it could happen. My point would be, ownership kept John around when they let Pete go. They could have easily fired him. They clearly think either his vision is correct or he is the guy to lead this rebuild. But I don't think they're going to sign off on a rebuild right now.
Well, I'll tell you what. If Pete has a 10-win, 11-win playoff season in Las Vegas and the Seahawks get into a rebuild, that's going to be a real tough sell.
Pete and Russ picking the Raiders.
Right?
Or
your
Geno.
maybe. Your original question was, is the Kubiak hire going to make or break Macdonald's career? I don't think that is necessarily true, but I think, like, if you listen to this conversation, this offseason could make or break Macdonald's career, and it could have nothing to do with Macdonald himself.
Yeah.
If they blow the quarterback situation, then that could end up sinking Macdonald's career, if for no other reason than it could sink John Schneider, and then you get a new GM, and the new GM wants a new coach, and then you're going to take, if you don't have the right, if you go get Quinn Ewers, and Quinn Ewers is who I think Quinn Ewers is.
Yes.
Mike Macdonald's not going to win a lot of games in the next few years. He won't be here a long time.
Yeah.
And then if Schneider can't, it's same thing on offensive line. If they can't fix offensive line, then Kubiak's going to look like ass, and Schneider's probably going to be on his way out. Right. Yep. And Kubiak, he's had bad offenses. And so if he does tank, there's a lot of avenues where if this offseason doesn't go the right way, it could, domino its way into Macdonald out the door.
I'm dubbing this offseason the MacGyver or MacGruber offseason, because there's this tricky bomb that you've got to defuse, and you better hope that these guys that are making these decisions are MacGyver and figure out how to stop it, and not MacGruber and having it blow up everything and everyone. So it does feel like it's a very delicate spot. The team's a little bit right in a delicate moment, and so we got one super chat, and then we're going to let everybody go. Detail Oriented says, honest question, how much of the O-line issue is JS or his scout team, or was it a collective failure of Pete, JS, and scout team? I know it's on JS now, but I wonder if it was steered wrong. Anybody have strong takes? Rob?
Can I ask you obviously you're heading to Mobile tomorrow, Brian. Can you keep an eye on 3 players on the offensive line? So Membu, you've spoken a lot about Membu, but there's him, there's Gray Zabel, and there's Wyatt Millum. They are the 3 players who grade very well in both blocking schemes, and they're all going to be in Mobile. So I'm fascinated to see how those 3 players, perhaps more than any other, perform, because that sort of having that ability to mix in between the different schemes, and then we'll see how they test down the line. If you could just sort of, I'd be interested to hear your views actually in Mobile on what you kind of see from those 3 in the 1v1s.
I will definitely take a look, and you're also making me think about, I don't think this will happen. I know you've talked about, Rob, but Drew Dahlman as a free agent, might make more sense now if you're going to be a zone scheme team. I still don't think they're going to make a move at center. I think they're going to decide that they're okay with what they have, but that's another potential domino there. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Klint Kubiak's year before New Orleans, you guys know where he was? San Francisco. Sam Darnold was the backup quarterback there. Yeah. That might make you a little nervous. Kirk Cousins. He spent a lot of time with Kirk Cousins too.
John went to his USC Pro Day in 2018.
I cannot see the Seahawks signing Sam. I just can't see the number being right. I mean, I'm not against seeing how it goes, but I mean, the amount of things that would have to happen.
He might do it. Reportedly, Pete really liked Sam. I mean, I think it was Coward.
That makes all the sense in the world. I would be shocked to some extent if he doesn't end up in Vegas. That seems like the place.
Russ's camp seems to be pushing an angle lately.
That is definitely.
Yeah.
That was all over those morning shows today.
What, the Russ?
Russ wants to be in Vegas. Russ and PETA fixed fences.
Well, Russ is running back. Like, he's trying to find anybody that wants him at this point. So, yeah, I mean, that's expected. Guys, let me let any closing thoughts, and then we're going to wrap up here. Nathan, any closing thoughts from you?
Go Chiefs.
Go Chiefs. Deryck.
This hire lives and dies on whether John Schneider drafts a guard in the first round.
Ooh. Rob.
Just glad that it's done so we can concentrate on the Senior Bowl.
Yes. Jeff.
They need to sign veteran offensive linemen. It cannot be a draft-only thing. Just watching like Mekhi Becton the last 2 weeks just toss around dudes. And I don't know if he fits the Shanahan offense and what they're going to do, but I know the Shanahan offense, like it's supposed to alleviate pass protection, make it easier. I think you're right, Brian. I think Drew Dahlman now, if Deryck said that center is making all the line calls and things like that, usually like an offensive lineman, the Shanahan tree's gone out and signed a center right away, like they signed Alex Mack. I think we might have to revisit some of those free agent predictions, but if they go in and they're like, oh, we're just going to draft in the third round, they're screwed. And they better watch these games and see the interior offensive line of KC and Philly, what that does for a running back. Hopefully, I feel like I've convinced myself 10 years in a row. Like, this is the year they're going to do it.
I know. I'll tell you what.
Well better.
I'm with you, Jeff. If the answer that John Schneider comes back with is the way that we're going to help Klint Kubiak and Mike Macdonald and this team get over the hump is insert a rookie into the youngest starting offensive line probably in the NFL, and that's essentially your sole answer, plus development, then just mail in your pink slip. Like, that's not going to do it. You have to bring in somebody who you know is an upgrade and not a veteran just because they're a veteran, but an upgrade at that position. And so we'll see if that happens. We're about to learn a lot more over the next week, and who knows? Maybe I'll run into some Seahawks folks down there and learn a little bit more. But we will see. Thank you especially to Rob Staton for coming on in the middle of the night across the pond. Jeff Simmons not feeding his baby just so he could come and talk about Klint Kubiak. Deryck Gebe doing his first double pod day. Amazing work, Deryck. Really, really love it. And Nathan, who, master of all, can talk with his mouth moving, without it moving, can cheer for the Chiefs and tell us why Klint Kubiak could be a disaster all in one sitting. It was a master class from all of you. So thanks all of you. For folks tuning in tomorrow, I don't know when I'll be on, probably in Dallas Fort Worth Airport with my 3-hour layover before I go to Mississippi and then drive to Mobile. So keep an eye out, subscribe. Make sure to go to Rob's channel as well, Seahawks Draft Blog, read his blog. He's going to be writing and reading all about the Senior Bowl as well. All right, everybody, until we see you next, have a great rest of your night.